Good evening. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Dennis Ward. An event was held at the British Columbia Legislature to honor a campaign to stop violence against women and children. As APTN's Tina House reports, it was a chance for all political parties to honor the good work being done on this issue.
To honor the Moosehide campaign, the procession of drummers, including elders and First Nations, walked with BC Premier John Horgan and members of the Legislative Assembly to the front of the BC Legislature.
As we all work together to end male violence against women and children, and the only possible way we can do that is if we stand together, men and women from every corner of this great province, in every community, on every street, in every home.
The Moosehide campaign was started by Paul Lacerte and his daughter Raven after they did a road trip together along the infamous Highway of Tears, where close to 20 women and girls have gone missing or were murdered.
This is a movement of people who are ready to take action and build a society where women and children are safe, that we can be proud of.
The Premier and members of the BC Legislature wore the symbolic Moosehide pin and also took part in a one-day fast to offer their support. The millionth pin was given out to Lorelei Williams. Lorelei is a well-known advocate for murdered missing women.
You know, this is a hard issue. It just hits my heart. You know, we shouldn't have to lose our women and girls. This shouldn't be an issue in our country.
Joining Lorelei at the event were members of her dance group, Butterflies in Spirit. Each dancer has a family member or friend that's been murdered or missing. For elder Lillian George, it's another step in her healing.
I'm here in honor of my two murdered aunts, Lynn and Christine Howard, who were murdered violently and brutally between Camel River and Gold River. A dance in their memory.
The BC government also announced that February the 15th would be known as Moosehide Day in the province.
There's not a dry eye in the house when we hear these stories, and I've traveled to Highway 16 and met with families over the years that have lost mothers, daughters, nieces, sisters, and it's almost inconceivable that this could be happening in this country.
The Moosehide campaign also received $2 million in funding to continue its mission to end violence against women and children. Tina House, APTN National News, Victoria.
An Indigenous advocacy group in Montreal teamed up with researchers to find out what services homeless Indigenous people in the city need most. On Friday, they released their findings. Tom Fenario has the story.
I touch my ears and say thank you, Creator, for letting me hear. And not only hear, but truly listen.
Teely Nomadin's opening prayer wasn't just about giving thanks. It was also a call to action.
We need to really listen to what our Indigenous participants had to say. Normadin,
a Mohawk member of the Montreal Urban Aboriginal Network, is referring to the results of a study released Friday. 119 vulnerable or homeless Indigenous individuals were surveyed for it. Divided into 4 subgroups of Inuit and First Nations men and women, the results pointed to gaps in services they would like to receive. Chief among them, affordable housing.
The two kinds of housing that emerged most strongly were having your own house or apartment with a rent subsidy and living in sort of housing designed for Aboriginal people with culturally appropriate services.
Marie-Ève Bordelot is Montreal's newly appointed Commissioner of Indigenous Affairs. The Cree Commissioner says she'll make sure City Hall sees the study.
I will be working with all of the bureaus in Montreal, so I will bring definitely this research with me when I meet with the people here in Montreal. I will share the data of this research because it's such an important tool.
That's why I sleep all the time, every night.
Indigenous people, especially Inuit, are overrepresented among the city's homeless population. Grassroots organizations in Montreal have been advocating for Indigenous-only social housing for years. The idea is to include culturally appropriate services within the building. But the city also has a history of not-in-my-backyardism. The Open Door Shelter, for example, has been looking for a new location for over a year, but keeps getting turned away.
Not in my backyard, I'm sorry, but this is everyone's yard.
Normandan doesn't expect to change attitudes overnight, but she promises that the Montreal Urban Aboriginal Network will not let the research gather dust.
Movement, action, doing something about it. It's not just research that is going to sit on somebody's desk. Thank you.
Tom Fenario, APTN National News, Montreal.
Defense lawyers for Raymond Cormier have elected not to call any evidence in the 56-year-old's second-degree murder trial. The jury has been instructed that closing arguments are set for next Tuesday. Cormier has pleaded not guilty to second-degree murder in the August 2014 death of 15-year-old Tina Fontaine. The Crown closed its case Wednesday following 12 days of testimony from 46 witnesses.
So that's all you need to know about me, though. Right away. I don't know if you heard about it or not, but I was arrested on October the 1st, 2014, put inside, and then I was investigated for murder. The murder was the murder of Tina Fontaine.
Jurors heard the audio recordings were obtained between June 2015 and December 2015 as part of an undercover police operation known as Project Styx. In the recordings, Cormier discussed several topics, including Tina Fontaine and her death, with undercover police officers and friends. Around 10,000 police intercepts were obtained during the 6-month investigation. In a portion of one of the recordings played for the jury in court, Cormier tells a friend he wants to find Fontaine's killer. Fontaine's body was found in the Red River, wrapped in a duvet weighed down with rocks. Court has heard there's no forensic evidence linking Cormier to the duvet and no forensic evidence linking either Fontaine or Cormier to a stolen blue truck the Crown believes was used to transport Fontaine to the river. The Crown closed its case Wednesday following 12 days of testimony from 46 witnesses. Among those who took the stand, Fontaine's friends and family, police officers, a toxicologist and pathologist, as well as friends of Cormier's. The jury heard Cormier denied killing Fontaine in an October 1st, 2014 videotaped interview with detectives. In one other of the audio recordings obtained by police in November 2015 and played for the jury, a police officer testified Cormier was by himself when he said this. During cross-examination, Cormier's lawyers suggested he was referring to one of the scenarios in the undercover police operation involving a staged domestic assault, in which an undercover officer laid on the floor of an apartment suite and was ultimately removed and carried away in a truck in order to provoke a reaction from Cormier. No information was revealed in court about how Cormier reacted in that scenario. Josh Crabb, CTV News, Winnipeg.
The proposed $800 million settlement of a class action suit involving 60 Scoop survivors is being challenged. Some Manitoba survivors are trying to gather 2,000 signatures to scrap the agreement and begin renegotiation. Here's what some of the Manitoba survivors said today at their press conference in Winnipeg.
This agreement that was put forward to 60 Scoop survivors has a clause that if we opt into the agreement, we are signing away our rights to sue for sexual and physical abuse. So basically they're trying to sweep us under the carpet and get rid of us. We as children had no say in where we were sent. And now they are giving us no say in how we are going to be compensated for this really dark part of Canadian history.
I will be opting out on the agreement. I want a new agreement and a better financially. I want the world to know what is going on. I want to have my voice heard. And with this agreement, they do not want your voice to be heard.
I would like to have some transparency. I would like to be a part of the negotiations. That was never on the table. If this is about myself, what I went through, I need that to be heard as well.
With residential school survivors, they got to go home every summer, and of course they suffered horrible abuses going to those schools, but they still knew where they came from. They still knew whether they were Cree, Dene, Ojibwe. We never got to go home, and we just want a fairer agreement. That's all we're asking for.
So this is basically an opt-out and renegotiate campaign then?
Yes, opt-out and renegotiate, exactly. And we fully realize that lawyers need to be paid, but not to the tune of $75 million.
And you want to take this campaign across the country?
Yes.
Yes. Do you have any plans or funding to do that so far?
No, we do not have funds to do that so far. There are some First Nation chief and councils that are coming forward to say that they'd like to help us with that and support us. The first place we want to go to is Saskatchewan.
The province of Manitoba today announced the big winners in the upcoming legal marijuana business, and First Nations are among them. More on that after the break. Here's a look at Saturday's weather forecast starting on the East Coast. Sunny and -6 in Halifax and Fredericton. 20 below for Happy Valley, Goose Bay and Cartwright. It's -9 in Saguenay and Chibougamau on Saturday. -3 in Sept-Îles. 0 in Windsor. -1 in Sarnia. -4 in Ottawa. -5 in Sudbury, Wawa, and Kapuskasing. Over to northern Manitoba, -33 in Churchill on Saturday, -11 in Ginley Harbor and Brandon, 1 degree warmer in Winnipeg. Sunny right across Saskatchewan, -13 in Regina, Saskatoon, and North Battleford. -24 on Saturday in Stony Rapids and Uranium City. Welcome back. Good news today for several Manitoba First Nations who have invested in the recreational marijuana business. The Manitoba government announced it has selected 4 companies to open retail stores in the province once it's legal, as expected this summer. Melissa Ridgen reports.
A consortium of Ontario and U.S. businesses, along with the Fisher River Cree Nation, had one of the 4 successful proposals. National Access Cannabis is another. Broken Head, Long Plain, Peguis, Nelson House, and the Opaskwayak Cree Nation are all First Nations partnered with that company. Manitoba made it clear last fall that Indigenous businesses would have favor in this new economy.
The Manitoba government is very interested in retail opportunities in economic development for our Indigenous communities, and we felt that that was an important part to put in the RFP so that business, Manitoba is open for business, and we want to make sure that the Indigenous communities are included in this.
Opaskwayak Cree Nation Chief Christian Sinclair serves on the National Access Cannabis Board.
We saw it as a national rollout, recognizing that this is an emerging market, and it's no different than the fur trade a couple hundred years ago where Aboriginal people were able to benefit from that industry. We see this as a similar opportunity where we're getting in on the ground floor.
How many cannabis shops and where they'll be located in Manitoba all has to be figured out between now and when pot becomes legal, which could be as early as July. Melissa Ridgen, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Yukon First Nations are celebrating the 45th anniversary of the document Together Today for Our Children Tomorrow. That document laid the foundation for negotiations for Yukon's modern-day land claim settlement. In 1973, a delegation of Yukon chiefs traveled to Ottawa to lobby with the federal government to start negotiations for a modern-day treaty. Many Yukon First Nations dedicated their lives to negotiating a final agreement. Today, 11 of the 14 Yukon First Nations have agreements giving them independence from the Indian Act and self-governing authority over their lands and people. The Cody First Nation in Saskatchewan held a rally for their hometown hero, Bridget Lequette, who is currently part of Team Canada's women's hockey team in Pyeongchang and the first Indigenous woman to play for the team. CTV's Stephanie Davis has more.
It was a day of celebration on the Cody First Nation. Crowds gathered at the Chief Gabriel School to celebrate one of their own. Bridget Laquette, a Cody First Nation member, currently representing Canada on the women's hockey team at the Winter Games in South Korea. But to the people on Cody First Nation, she's so much more than a hockey player.
And, it gives hope to the kids, to know that their dreams can come true as well.
Knowing that they're from the same reserve as her, and kids look up to her, and she's a role model, and she's our pride and joy here. We just love her.
Among those who attended the rally was Laquette's brother. He says this kind of support has helped motivate his sister.
Knowing that all these people behind her, I feel like it makes her as a stronger player, and as the tournament goes on, she knows she has the support behind her.
Children celebrating Laquette say they've been watching closely during every game, hoping to see a gold medal awarded to the woman they call their hero.
Well, she's a great role model. So the kids are really excited. When we announced we were going to do this, they were all so excited. They just wanted to come out and support her.
To cap off the day of celebration, a Bridget Laquette tribute sign was installed at the entrance of the community, a lasting reminder that hard work pays off. Laquette and Team Canada have been able to hold on to a perfect record so far at this year's Olympic Games. The team will play in semi-final action on Sunday, with their opponents still to be decided. It's safe to say that the entire Cody First Nation community will be watching and cheering as Laquette and Team Canada get one step closer to Olympic gold. Stephanie Davis, CTV News, Cody First Nation.
And many of us will be watching and cheering. To Australia now, where earlier this year, Harley Windsor made history as the first Australian to win a world figure skating title. Now the young man from Western Sydney is Australia's first Indigenous Winter Olympian. Here's National Indigenous Television with his story.
At just 20, Harley Windsor remains humble and grateful.
It's a completely different world to what my parents grew up in. I've got every opportunity available for me, and they had to miss out on so much.
Both his parents are Indigenous, overcoming hardship a common theme throughout his family's history. His mother Josie grew up on a mission.
There was no electricity, no running water, but I swore that I'd never let that happen to my kids.
It's where she learnt to read.
We got the flour made paste to put on the walls to put the newspaper up to stop the wind from blowing through the cracks on the wall.
But landmark movements such as the 1967 referendum promised to create a better life for the next generation of Indigenous Australians.
What they've given me, if I can make the most of it, then I sort of feel like I'm giving back to them a little bit what they missed out.
Since his birth, Harley has embraced his heritage. He says Indigenous dancing has helped him become a figure skating star.
I think definitely the movement and feeling the music helps a lot coming from the Aboriginal sort of dance background.
He'd pick up clap sticks and just start doing shake a leg himself when he was about 2-years old.
I think that's why he got really good feeling of sequence. Like, when you have dancing backgrounds or choreography or anything, you learn sequence very quickly.
Talent which Galina Patchen has helped nurture. Harley's longtime coach remembers the first present she received from him, this Indigenous painting.
It's like a Milky Way and a skater doing spin. It's very beautiful.
His dream of becoming a professional figure skater is now a reality. In March, Harley, along with his partner Katia, captured Australia's first gold medal in the sport at the Junior World Titles.
Lots of mixed emotions, there was sort of happy tears and, there was shock.
An all-new episode of APTN Investigates airs right after the news. We'll hear from the reporter after the break. Here's the rest of Saturday's weather forecast, picking back up in northern Alberta. Minus 15 in Peace River and Fort McMurray. Minus 12 in Edmonton, Red Deer, and Calgary. In BC, snow and plus 2 in Penticton. 0 with flurries in Kamloops. Minus 8 in Prince George and Fort Nelson. Minus 11 in Dease Lake. In Yukon, minus 12 in Watson Lake and Rock River. A mild day in parts of NWT, not Fort Resolution and Yellowknife, however, with a high of minus 23. 22 below in Sax Harbor, minus 19 in Paulatuck. In Nunavut, minus 44 in Whale Cove. The cold spot is Baker Lake at minus 45, minus 43 in Joe Haven, minus 35 in Resolute. Welcome back. The statue of Halifax founder Edward Cornwallis may have been taken down, but his shadow remains. On this week's APTN Investigates, reporter Trina Roach looks into how history and reconciliation clash over monuments and statues. Here's Trina now to talk about her show from Halifax. Trina, thanks for joining us. Can you explain why the Cornwallis statue is so offensive to Mi'kmaq?
Edward Cornwallis, he sailed into what's now Nova Scotia in 1749, and so he's celebrated as the founder of Halifax. But to the Mi'kmaq, Cornwallis he represents genocide, right? He's a symbol of violence against Indigenous people because he issued scalping proclamations on Mi'kmaq men, women, and children, and it's clear in letters that he wrote to the Lords of Trade that he wanted to root the Mi'kmaq out of Nova Scotia. So he, for the last 3 decades, Mi'kmaq have been aware of this and really fighting, saying, why are we honoring this guy? Like, take the statue down. And then finally it happened.
The statue did come down, as you say, while you were filming the episode. How did you handle that?
It was like you're sort of gathering tape. I was gathering tape before the holidays, and the statue's still there. Through January, statue's still there. And then very suddenly, there was like a very sudden chain of events. The Mi'kmaq chiefs were upset, demanded action. The grassroots rallied. City council sort of feared a conflict and said, you know what, let's just take it down for safety. And the city council voted overwhelmingly to do that. And so it was just meant really like, a lot of the history stuff is still all there and all relevant. I think the Cornwallis debate is still going on. There's still sort of this polarized opinion. So it's still a very relevant discussion. You see it still with other figures like Sir John A. Macdonald and down in the States. So it's still a very relevant topic. My ending just became a whole lot different. And so I sort of had to scramble to incorporate this removal of Cornwallis.
And Trina, what's been the reaction since it was removed?
It was a really celebratory moment for the Mi'kmaq. They held a ceremony there a few days later, after the statue was removed on January 31st. And it was just, there was drumming and smudging, trying to, sort of cleanse the area. It's a park that's still called Cornwallis, so there's still some work to do. But very celebratory, and I'll just wrap it up with saying, one of the people there said, this is not an erasure of history. This is us making sure that we're not erased, and I think that is a sentiment that really sums up the Mi'kmaq perspective on this, and they're ready to move forward and have a discussion on reconciliation.
Well, Trina, really looking forward to seeing this episode. Thanks for taking time to speak with us about it.
Thanks, Dennis.
And you can watch Trina's entire episode tonight on APTN Investigates in less than 3 minutes' time. And that is your APTN National News for this Friday. Don't forget to tune in for APTN National News Weekend on Sunday. I'm Dennis Ward. Have a great night. Good evening. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Dennis Ward. An event was held at the British Columbia Legislature to honor a campaign to stop violence against women and children. As APTN's Tina House reports, it was a chance for all political parties to honor the good work being done on this issue.
To honor the Moosehide campaign, the procession of drummers, including elders and First Nations, walked